Welcome to the More in Common podcast. We all know how hard it can be to handle conflict and disagreements, especially when it comes to politics. These moments can strain even our closest relationships, and that's why we're here. I'm Keith Richardson, and for over 5 years, we at More in Common have worked with professionals from all walks of life, NFL teams, tech companies, and community leaders, ultimately to improve how people connect and communicate. And with my background in psychology, I've spent 20 years refining strategies that focus on compassion and understanding. And I'm joined by my co-host, Gerren, who joined the team 2 years ago. Gerren is a producer, an entrepreneur, and a creative, and he lives the principles we talk about, bringing real-world experience to every episode. Together, we're here to help you discover how we all have more in common than we might think. Enjoy the show.
Clips. Welcome back to the More in Common podcast. I'm Gerren Taylor. That is Keith Richardson. Keith, how are you today?
Feel good today, man. The sun's up. I mean, I'm trying to look for it's 50 degrees. It's supposed to be 70 degrees here today, but it's not. So, I mean, it is March 13th at the time of this recording. And
don't be giving away secrets like the actual time of recording.
I know, right? How relevant is this?
I think you look mighty crispy in 4K, Keith. You look very sharp. For the people who can't watch
this Canon, I'm gonna even adjust it just a little bit.
If you can't watch this, you're missing out because Keith is hitting the tones. He's hitting all the tones right now.
The right lighting, the clean or wet hair. Well,
I mean, crispy like a KFC wing. Crispy like a Taco Bell taco.
There's a real, sometimes you come into recording or any conversation for that matter, and sometimes you just got all the passion and energy for it, and sometimes you just chill. I feel this chill energy right now, and I like it. Maybe the audience feels it too, and they're just gonna listen. They're gonna stick with it just to maintain that energy.
And I do want to thank everybody that's been liking, sharing, and being a part of More Common podcast community of this far. For our newest season, so to speak. I mean, if you're from the old school, that's cool too. But I really feel like the people that have been here since, all the fields, they get me. They understand why I'm wearing this hat, for instance. I know I keep making visual references, but just, get on social media. People.
Yeah, just watch it on YouTube. Watch us. Just watch us. Yeah. It's our YouTube that's getting more traction right now than your audio.
There for you to enjoy. And that's why we do it. Speaking of why we do it.
What's up today, man? Yeah.
Why we do a lot of things comes down to the people who you do it with. So one of the things that I really enjoy about what we have with More in Common and the More in Common podcast is the community that we build with it. And we've touched on community building online before and how community building online still mirrors some of what our evolutionary urges for community building are. But I do think that we should come back around and talk about not only the importance of community as humans, but the physical, personal community and some of those differences. Because I think that especially when people are circling wagons, feeling fearful, not sure what's happening next, it's important to fall back on your community because sometimes it feels like there is nothing else.
Dude, it's such I love this topic. I've been thinking about this topic, and I think about things often from an evolutionary standpoint. I've been thinking about this topic for months. And so much of how we think about community now, it's we use the word in your community. Well, what's your community, right? It's the Black community. Well, we have finally reached over the last few years, okay, it's the Black diaspora, not the community, right? Like there are different Black communities, which are simply just groups of Black people, right? That
And it's like
if
there's
you
people
have
that, we don't all agree with right there. So
right, and there might be 10 different communities. So what does that actually mean? What is it's my online community? What is that? I come from a small community. Well, I live in a small town. We have 13,000 people. It's a small town. But that's still huge relative to what community is, relative to our human experience. And like you said it right there at the top, like really digging in on the importance of that in person. What does that look like? Why is it hard? And what can we do in 2025 when all of the variables that surround us make it virtually impossible to get the community that we actually need from people? So that's the angle of today's episode. If you're interested to keep listening, please.
well, I mean, I think that not to get too far ahead about what we're talking about today, but there are, I think, significant challenges to how, even in my lifetime, in-person community is built, shared, and respected amongst people, amongst peer groups. And I wonder, if we can talk about what you think the risks of that are. I mean, first of all, do you agree? Do you agree that in some ways, even though we are more connected through technology, we're almost less connected as in-person groups? And what do you think that kind of risk set looks like for the human species?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw this in COVID, right? Okay, we have digital. You and I, like, we are more connected than ever insofar as that you and I can create a podcast where you're in Tijuana, Mexico, and I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, right? Like, I can talk to you um, by video, right? Like, I can look at your face while we're having this conversation, and we can do so much from a productivity standpoint. But we aren't an evolved creature. We talk about this all the time, right? Like much of what we experience as a species is very similar to the things that were experienced 200, 300,000 years ago, right? Different tools, different implementations, but the biology, the psychology is all fairly pretty much the same as far as we can tell, right? We don't have a lot of documentation of what social structures look like. We have to surmise it from fossils and cave drawings and things like that. But you can, from burial grounds and the way, ancient people, put people to rest, Neanderthals, like there's some really interesting recent archaeological digs that demonstrate that level. We have a very similar makeup, but we just don't exercise it anymore, right? And if we back up to like why does community matter? We talk about it every episode. It's survival, right? We as a species cannot survive on our own as individuals. We are a smaller species. We don't have sharp teeth. We're not the strongest. Like if we're out in the wild and it's just me and I run across a baboon, I'm going to lose, right? If I come across an elephant and I'm hunting by myself, I'm going to lose, right, if I don't have the tools. We, as a species, have a long gestational period to the extent that the first 2 to 3 months of our lives, we physically cannot do anything on our own.
Absolute blobs. And anyone who's a parent, you were just
absolute blobs. Like you give birth to a child and you have to hold the head up, right? Contrast that to a giraffe, and a giraffe falls out and starts walking.
Right.
Right. Like,
A little stumbly, a little
wobbly for a
but,
little bit,
but they're doing it.
can still run away from a predator, right? Still vulnerable, but not as vulnerable as we are. We take a year before we can walk. Another 6 months before we can even effectively use language that is developed over time to communicate. Like, we aren't a physically dominant species in the food chain. So when you think about that, like, we need other people. If, a woman can give birth within a year of another child, right? So then you have the maternal role trying to sustain a newborn that can't hold its head up, while you have another child that's starting to walk that still needs sustainability. So now you need other people who aren't beholden to breastfeeding and the other natural sustaining activities that we take to help take care of that child. Like, this is just basic of survival elements. Then you talk about, and why this all exists is because it takes a long time to develop size or to develop brain of functionality, right? So we have a long developmental period. Like, our brain doesn't fully develop for 25 years. Like, this evolutionary strength is also our weakness.
Right.
The strength is that our brain develops so that is our superior functionality in the ecosystem of life. And it takes a long time for that to take place. So while that all is happening and we're learning to coordinate and cooperate with other people, so when we're hunting big animals, the development of tools and the ambushing effect all takes coordination, cooperation in working together. Now, people often will refer to the amygdala as it's an almond-shaped, primitive brain that is evolved over hundreds of millions of years, that is consistent in most species, right? Like, that is the purest of survival: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flow, right?
What we've touched on before, right? The amygdala,
we've talked about that before,
the
right?
5S,
and fear, and how we do that,
right?
So species have these, and yet even other species have learned to cooperate in order to survive. Orca whales, top of the food chain in the sea, they hunt seals together. Fish group together to look like birds group together to look like a bigger entity than they are. Even the lions don't survive on their own. They have prides, right? So the idea of community is all part of our survival need. We've
I just want you to know
developed
how hard I fought the Lion King call out right there when you did the pride thing. Anyway, keep going.
It's like my karaoke song, like, legit.
It touched my heart for some reason.
I've sung that song at karaoke, right? So ultimately, our evolution has depended on community, right? But what does that community actually mean from an evolutionary standpoint? It is an organizing mechanism of roles to move and survive our day-to-day needs. We need to eat, we need to drink water, we need shelter, right? Like, we need to survive from the potential of ambush from other predators. But, like, there are so many things in the vast history of species on this planet. I'm not talking about the last, we'll say, 10,000 years of civilization, but really the last 5. It is a very small window in the history of our existence. And so we establish biological mechanisms to build connection and sharing of roles and responsibilities towards the accomplishment of a goal. So things like the release of oxytocin or endorphins that form social bonds, that form social connections, are now into. So you talk about why it's hard today. Now we're replacing that with an emergence of more dopamine release, pleasure, self enjoyment, which we can get from social media. We can get, but these are bits, and the levels change, and what we need to make sure that our dopamine levels are high enough so we don't go into more of a depressive state, and that serotonin is regulated, is all out of whack.
Right.
In an industrialized ecosystem.
Well, I was going to ask about that because now we don't interrely upon each other as much for, okay, you use the example of child weaning. I mean, in the last 100 years, we got formula. So you don't have that need of a
Dude,
bond.
and there was a period, like, you like, think about the social structures, like, just talking about formula. Like, there was a period, I think starting in the 50s, when formula became available, where it was thought that formula was healthier than breast milk.
I think that was a marketing ploy, but
Most things are. We'll
yeah,
talk about that in an episode soon. But what that does is it changes behavior,
right.
right? So then parents are using formula, and like the bonding mechanisms start to go away,
Right.
or they shift, they change. So our modern society, it's not that we've evolved now to be this, like, we are still that same species, and the social ecosystem and structure is different. We no longer, you were saying it, depend on each other in this space that we all live in to help sustain the space that we live in. We all, like, industrial revolution has produced jobs that, quite honestly, from a historical standpoint, are made up, right? Now, I'm not diminishing the value of the jobs that anybody has, but the jobs that we have are now for economic gain. And that is our shared motion moving forward. And it tends to be very individualistic. So all of our social contribution is
Right.
around how much money you're contributing into the ecosystem, whether it's from a consumer standpoint or a tax base, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's what kind of makes it feel like we're all sort of kind of competing with each other in a way. I think that even in a workplace where you're making widgets, everybody's in the factory making widgets. You have a much easier way to kind of see that you're all on the same team and build community around that. Now that so much work is siloed and intangible and remote, even, it's like, is Janie trying to steal my job? Is she coming for what
Well,
I?
yeah, let's this brings up two different variables that contribute to this complexity. Let's talk about just the workspace in general, because now we go to work for this economic benefit. Even if you're building widgets for a company to sell, to make money, and bring to the market. You might be able to personalize some value because you're doing good, because you're creating this thing and you're doing that. But this ecosystem that you're creating is a work ecosystem, a work community. When you go home, you're not building widgets with your family, right? Now your roles and responsibilities and the things that you are tasked with and charged with are different. They're different, not just within your family, but within your neighborhood. And now, if you have hobbies, maybe you golf, maybe you play baseball, maybe you dance. Now your roles and responsibilities. So we don't just live in a small space where we have our contributing functions both to the social and functional elements of our community. That's all distributed. It's all distributed. And so that's difficult for us to balance. Now we have these conversations like work-life balance and being able to navigate that, because it's just so much that we just haven't fully evolved to be able to really make that biologically beneficial
I
to us.
love that point for a moment. Just like the whole advent of the idea of work life balance indicates like a sheer disconnect between what living is and what working is. And that is
Right.
a new phenomenon in a lot of ways, because, for generations, thousands of years, what you did was your work, right? Like that's how we got a lot of people's last names. Like, what is a Smith?
Your
You know?
life, your life, like there's this disconnect. It's a tangential life. So my contribution to my family is through this community over here that deposits this currency into a shared account, so I can then take that currency and pay my mortgage, right? Versus I wake up with the same people, we go out, we hunt, we gather. Like in the history of tribal life, there's a system, right? As you hunt, you gather, you celebrate. Why? And we've talked about this before. When you hunt, you don't have refrigeration. We have perishable foods. So everybody gets their share, and we're going to try to consume it because we're going to lose it anyway. By the end of the day, we've all done our stuff. We don't have emails to go to. We don't have, something that we have to contribute. We don't have to pay bills. We don't have to do all that at home stuff. So, the whole sitting around a fire,
Right.
peace
The whole
pipes, that
tribe gets
image,
together.
you get together and you party.
Right. For 3 days
Right
sometimes.
now,
Depends on what you get.
right.
Yeah.
Like, so now we take vacations. And so that stuff isn't part of our everyday. And it's not like we go to work, we work with these people, we contribute and we do our things. And then at the end of that, we party, right? And then we go to sleep and we wake up and we're still with those people. We're hugging them, we're kissing them. That's why work is not family, right? Like it isn't, because we're not going back to those hormones. Like oxytocin is considered the social neurotransmitter, right? Like
They call it the
oxytocin
love
is,
hormone, right? Like that's the
yeah,
hormone.
but it's a bonding element. It's how we establish, like when we give hugs, there's a release and we create
Right.
connections. This is how we establish these connections.
I
Not
use
only that, what's that?
I said I could use some oxytocin right now.
Oh, dude, I could always use some oxytocin. But not only that, now we have these phenomena of like people are born into families and we're not focused on this community development relationship element. So people leave families, right? And I'm going to go create my own family with my friends and I'm going to find my community over here. And like in our formative emotional years between the ages of 0 to 7, and then our formidable social years between the ages of 12 and 17, we have nowhere to go. So that's where we're establishing our connections. And then we're trying to recreate that when we're adults. And our biology, our evolution, like our growth and development, yes, we can change and we can have those things, but it is not the same. Right?
Right.
And so then you add, I said there were two variables. You talked about like now I've got money and it's for me and it creates competitive and all this other stuff. In compassion research, it's talked about frequently, at least in the research I've read, is that about 10,000 years ago, and I've mentioned Robert Sapolsky before, he's written the book Behave. He talks about this a lot. 10,000 years ago is when everything shifted because we started to have agriculture where we could grow mass amounts of food and store it.
Right.
So now we shifted from a care and share. Hey, we're going to run out of this. You have some, I have some. We don't want to waste it type of mentality to now I get to control and hold. So now I get more of it. I can control it. I can hold it.
And
now
slowly
my survival is assured at the expense of your survival.
So what what is this in your hypothesis? And again, like we're assuming that we're not masters of the universe in this, but what is this disconnection from our earlier genetically developed community? What is that doing, do you think? Do you think this is related to how people are experiencing the world today, how we're moving through it?
I do. Part of it plays into this emergence of hyper individualism, right? Like, I do think there is a strong balance of individual care to community care, and that's a symbiotic relationship. We have to take care of ourselves and take care of others and make sure that others are taking care of us when we can't take care of ourselves. And it's this constant relationship that takes place. But now the emergence of hyper individualism is you're responsible for taking care of yourself. And if as long as you take care of yourself, everything else will fall into play. And I think that's so broken because things are starting to fray and fall apart. And why are things falling apart? Because we're only taking care of ourselves. And then we want this community to emerge when, if you think about the nuclear family dynamic, right? The nuclear family dynamic indicates a mom, a dad, and children. And that is it. That is wildly overpressurizing individuals. So now you are responsible for gestating your children, you're responsible for working, you're responsible for doing it all while you have these growing, developing beings that can't contribute to the space. So it's down to two people in essence, right? The take out, I'm oversimplifying this. So we're not talking about single parents and all that other stuff, but we're putting elder in homes because they can't contribute to the economy anymore. And we're not depending on each other to build this. We're depending on ourselves to function. What emerges then is just because my family might have some sort of shared social value with your family, we get to do it our way, you get to do it your way. And so we'll find commonality where we do, and then the differences that we have, they're not going to reconcile because we just get to, it's my family, I get to do. So it creates this wide array of social expectations that we can't reconcile. So then what does that do? My hypothesis, to your point of how it's playing out, studies and research show there is an increase in anxiety, there's an increase in depression, a significant increase, especially amongst men, in social isolation, right?
Yeah.
Feeling isolated, especially when you think about the last 100 years where men worked. So they were responsible for doing that. And it's not about friends. It's not about how you feel. It's just you do your duty, you go to work and you do this. And so community for generations amongst men, for not that many generations, but for the last few, has been ripped apart. And so now we have this social isolation. Now we're in 2025 where we have online communities and we have all these other spaces. But what we're not doing is in our space of people, that space where we exist, we're not depending on each other to, hey, look, let's say 7 of us lived in a house and we had 7 adults and 15 children, right? We'll just, so now amongst the 7 adults, how are we going to divide responsibilities?
Right.
This person's going to do the dishes. This person's going to clean the house. This person's going to pay the bills. And we're all depending on each other to run this ecosystem. We don't do that. We don't have that anymore. So we all start to feel more isolated. Now, this is my hypothesis. A lot of this is attributed to just the overuse of social media. I would contend overuse of social media is an attempt to fill in these biological needs that we're not getting in person.
Well, I mean, listen,
because we don't know how.
Not to be a downer, but I've got big fears that it's only going to get worse. as
Oh,
artificial intelligence replaces human connections and becomes a lot of people's best friends. Listen, I heard a story on NPR about a woman who was
I
dating a GPT.
I heard the same story.
Dating a
Like
GPT at
she
60 hours a
fell in
week.
love, and GPT had to break up with her like 8 times, and she went through the emotional depression of that.
Flabbergasted. You know what I mean?
Like, and part of like we talk about community and use that example. Like, it's us trying to find the feeling good because conflict, rejection,
Right.
these things that we are supposed to learn as we develop and grow through social interactions, free play outside, which is a significant change since we were kids and what happens now. Learning to navigate conflict, understanding it, teaching kids to navigate conflict and not just tell them how to do it, right? Like relying on this ecosystem to help develop and grow, we're not getting that same level of involvement in an early age. So then when we get older, we just don't want it because we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to process it.
So let's take a break there. And when we come back, let's talk about the rosier side of this and not be so doom and
Yeah.
gloom and talk about
Yeah.
how we can find and build community in today's modern world. This is the More in Common podcast. This is the More in Common podcast. I'm Gerren Taylor. That is Keith Richardson. Keith, we were talking again, not to be doom and gloom, but about some of the pitfalls of modern societies and the challenges that automatically are there for building in-person communities and physical communities for people. Um, so let's talk about now some sources, methods. What do you think? How do you do it in your life? And then how do people take that away? Go for
So
it.
one of the things, and I wish I could, I'd have to find the link, and I'll share it in the show notes because I know where it is. But this psychologist talks about this relative to building connection and community. If you live in a neighborhood, right, where maybe it's a cul-de-sac, it's a shared street, she asks the question, why do we all have lawnmowers? No one is out mowing their lawn every day. No one is out. Not everybody's mowing their lawn all at the same time. So a small thing is like you get together with your neighbors and you share the lawnmower, maybe two, right? It's like, hey, check in, check out, and you start to build a shared ecosystem. You're all taking care of the lawnmower. You're repairing the lawnmower. You're making sure everybody's making sure like you're sharing this thing, like these small acts, right? It's it it's like at work. Why do we find community at work? Because we all have our roles. Where it breaks down is that it's so individual. Like my job is on the line. Like at work, another way you can do that is create team-based incentive structures that rely not on hierarchical leadership, but project-based leadership. So from an evolutionary standpoint, we as a species aren't hierarchical, right? The leader emerges based on their strength relative to the task that needs to be completed. So maybe it's building shelter. Well, the person who is best suited to lead the group of building shelter will take that leadership role, and then everybody will play their functional role to make that shelter happen. But then let's say you go out on a hunt, somebody else has the strength there, and they're going to take a leadership role to coordinate, the strategy and what you're all going to do, and everybody's going to play their role. Building that type of space at work is a better way of creating community so people get that sense of shared accomplishment or are sharing amongst resources and helping support them, not just for me. I'm not just fixing this lawnmower so the next time I use it, it works. I'm fixing this lawnmower because the next person that uses it, it needs to work, right? And we need these things in our shared space, right? In our proximity, not with you. I love you, Gerren, but like we can't, like that community is harder to develop with you and Rodney and some of our other shared friends, and I just don't want to say that person's name out loud because, CIA and all.
Was it Voldemort? No.
Right. So there are a lot of little ways that we can do this that fall into the space of what we have as social structures today. My ideal, and this will be my final thought, is I would love a commune of sorts, right? Like not where,
How
50
hippie
of us live. What's that?
You went full hippie on me. No, I'm just kidding.
I did, but not like it's not separated from the global economy so much, but it's just a space where we have shared dining, we have shared entertainment, we have isolated sleeping places, and we have space for self alone time, but we share. Maybe we all grow a garden and someone's responsible for that, and someone's responsible for cooking at night, or you rotate the cooking duties. Take a group of your friends and everybody hosts dinner, right? Once a night each week. That's a big step, but just these ideas, there's so many ways that we can effectively build community for our biological needs, not just for our intellectual needs.
I actually heard some of this on the internet the other day, and that was kind of like the main throughput was like, listen, groceries are expensive. They're expensive for everybody right now. Knock on a neighbor's door and tell them that you're going to make a big something, a big pot of something, a big pan of something, be that lasagna, be it beef stew, whatever, and ask them if they're interested. And there will be some no's. There will be some people that'll say no, but there will be some people that'll say yes. And opening those doors, actively looking for those opportunities to open those doors is how you build community. Because, like, listen, none of us are getting through this by ourselves. We're not getting out of this alone. That's just not how any of this works. And the more we rely on I, me, mine to satisfy all of our, needs and desires, the further away we are from actually fulfilling self-actualization, right? Like the further we are from actually living out our true human potentials and our true human goals. So
amen.
Ultimately, we thrive on community. I try to build it everywhere I go. I do it through events. I do it through party. I do it through all kinds of things that are in person, very much not online, intentional efforts of seeing people. Like, let's go outside and go experience what life is like. So I'm so glad that we're able to kind of not only have this chat about what I think people don't sometimes notice, right? Because it's the day to day. It happens so fast. You're just running
so
through
hard.
it. It's so hard to be aware of these things sometimes. But then also, like, what do you do about it once you are? And having some solutions on hand, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah. Well, great closing thoughts. We'll end there. Leave us a comment. Leave us a note. Tell us what you think. Give us a like. Share with someone who you think would value from all of these conversations. And, go to moreincommonent.com if you want to learn more about us. And we appreciate you tuning in and appreciate your support. And let's keep going.
That's right. Keep it up. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Gerren Taylor. That's Keith Richardson. We'll see you next week.